Hi guys, it's Debbie, and today I'm back after a short break to speak about a horror film I have been waiting to watch for a very long time, and that is It, the 2017 remake of the 1990 miniseries, which was originally based on Stephen King's novel of the same name. As you may know, I moved over to the United States a couple of weeks ago. That is why there's not my usual lighting, there's not my usual background, and it marks the first film I've watched in the United States. So far so good. It was cheap, it was half the price of what I used to pay back in Italy, although the cinema was very old-fashioned and members of the audience actually had to stand up and ask the staff to turn the lights off as we were watching the film with the lights on. Now, before seeing the 2017 version of It, I had never read Stephen King's novel, and I never even got round to finish watching the miniseries, so I'd never seen the second part of it. I've only seen the first part. I found Tim Curry absolutely excellent in his portrayal of Pennywise, a frightening supernatural shape-shifting monster which usually appears in the form of a clown, other terrifying figures, or in the shape of what frightens his chosen victims. For example, in the old version, in one scene he appears in front of a child in the form of his deceased father, inviting him to join him. Both works, so the 1991 and this new 2017 one, cover mostly the same topics with some minor differences, and Pennywise again haunts a small town, mostly targeting children or young teens, luring them into less crowded locations to then taunt them and attack them. The character of Pennywise in this case is portrayed by Bill Skarsgård, and in my personal opinion he did an absolute awesome job. What made Tim Curry's performance so good back at the time was that even ignoring all the makeup and the creepy clown attire, everything in his smile, his eyes, his way of moving was something right out of a nightmare. He had created one of the creepiest characters on screen in a very long time, and so when the time came for a new performance, the stakes were very high. What we have to try and understand is that Pennywise is a very difficult character to portray because he isn't Pennywise, he's not the clown, he's not any of the other characters he appears as. He is this shape-shifting monster. He is portraying a character, something that needs to frighten his victims, because even when he appears in his normal clown attire, he is playing a figure. But Skarsgård was absolutely incredible. He was just as frightening, twitchy, insane as his predecessor, with a smile that could possibly beat Curry's. Also, thanks to the addition of some more modern effects, most of the scenes in which he appeared gained an even more nerve-wracking appearance. In general, he really managed to live up to everybody's expectations, and he also managed to make us relive the famous opening scene in which he appears from under the side of a road, inviting young Georgie to join him. What didn't live up to my expectations in this film, and what probably didn't live up to many other people's expectations, was how the Losers Club was introduced. Now, the members of the Losers Club are all characters, kids, which have a troubled past, whether it is bullying, abusive parents, rejection, peer pressure, neglect, and they all bond because of these struggles, and they form an incredible friendship. Now, when we start counting minutes, Pennywise, which is the actual poster face, he is the face of this film, doesn't have a very long screen time, and most of the story revolves around the children's struggles and friendship. So the element of the Losers Club is very important. But as I was watching, I couldn't suppress that feeling that the film kept shifting from an air of despair and doom, with a terrifying Pennywise that could appear at any given time or place, to a completely different feeling, more similar to a coming-of-age comedy drama. The story never managed to focus on one mood, but constantly and intensely focused on the nearly loving relationship between the characters, the happy fun time they were having together, swimming at the lake, riding on their bikes, telling rude jokes, expressing the first feelings of love. As I was saying before, I'm fully aware that the relationship between these kids is absolutely fundamental in the story, and the same strong bond can be found in the 1990s miniseries. The particular period of adolescence, so sitting between childhood and adulthood, enhances that feeling of discovering what death really is. But what I'm trying to say is quite hard to explain. What I'm trying to say is, you know that feeling products like Stranger Things or Freaks and Geeks had just because of the characters, because of that popular trending 80s, 90s retro vintage warm feeling of strong friendships, good times and good lines, regardless of what was going on in the plot. How he spoke more about a secondary character like Barb rather than the Demogorgon, or John's moustache rather than Sherlock's case. That fandom effect. I felt nearly as if it was jumping on that popular bandwagon and focusing too much on that element rather than the simpler and more effective concept of a well-developed set of characters united by common struggles against a demonic entity. If you look at works such as the OA, which presents very, very dark topics and which I would absolutely recommend watching, we strongly bond with the characters, but at the same time we are not distracted and continuously dragged away from the plot. We still keep on eagerly watching and following. Instead, in it, we were constantly skipping from boys looking at girls, this very aesthetic look to everything, a light and bright feeling of teenage joy, to Pennywise, which looks like he just stepped out of the worst circle of hell and then returned to the previous step after a few minutes. It is not a bad film, but Skarsgård's Pennywise is so menacing, so frightening, so insane that his evil presence and influence should last longer. We should have a feeling of doom throughout the whole film and not just when he appears. The only moment in which I really liked how the kids were presented was towards the end of the film, but I will not reveal anything to not spoil the film. Another element which really let me down was the effects department. Pennywise the Clown was perfect. His appearance was flawless. But then came the elements of CGI and the magic was completely shattered, as it was often awkward, appearing nearly outdated and ruining the creepiness of the whole situation. So on the one hand, I would recommend watching it. Altogether, it is not a complete disaster and there was some pretty good acting, especially by Bill Skarsgård, Jaden Lieberherr, Sophia Lillis, Finn Wolfhard. But on the other hand, it does have many flaws which don't make it give you the goosebumps just as much as the 1990 version. Let me know if you have seen it and what you thought about it with a comment here below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe for more movie related videos. See you soon. Bye.